Hey friends, I want to talk about two different distinct modes that I've found on my pilgrimage that help me frame what I'm doing, which I call, for lack of a better term, city mode and rural mode. And this is something I noticed implicitly a long time ago, and have been acting on, but making it, explicit has been helpful to me in leaning into my pilgrimage and being very intentional with my time. It's a little bit similar to what Paul Graham and others call maker mode versus manager mode, in that the idea is that like artists and creators and programmers are often on maker mode, where they just need to make the thing and spend a lot of time doing the thing, and inspiration when it comes, and it's hard to schedule. And then managers have a lot of meetings and those need to be scheduled, and some people often have a bit of both, and they have to know which mode they're in and how to relate to it. And that's been a helpful frame for me, certainly, because I relate to both of those moods. I have a lot of meetings and then also want to create things. I want to write novels. I want to make art. I want to build things. I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to study. And so knowing which mode I'm in is very helpful. And similarly, on my pilgrimage, on kind of a week-to-week, month-to-month scale, different places that I stay present different opportunities. So for example, I was just in New York City for like 7 weeks. I was in New York State and, in Manhattan and Brooklyn, a little bit upstate. And that's being in what I call city mode, which I primarily focus on meeting people and meeting new people, deepening connections, existing people. I mean, New York is kind of, in some ways, the capital of the world, and a lot of people are there, and people I care about, and dear friends, allies, collaborators, new people are always coming through. It's a good place to, this happened several times, just like spontaneously, where people I've been friends with on the internet for a long time happened to be there at that time, and so we could meet up. And I really prioritize meeting people that I'm connected to for the first time in person, because there's just such a download from spending time with someone in person and getting a sense of who they are, and them getting a sense of who you are, and building that relationship and really playing long games in that way. Like, I was actually thinking about this with my friend Priya, because Priya and I we'd been mutuals for like 7 years, I think, and we met in person maybe 6 years ago. And then this year we really developed a friendship and an alliance quite well. And it's like, well, that we were playing long games, and I'd been connected to her during that whole time, but finally the conditions were there to really deepen that connection. And so sometimes it turns out years later, it's useful to have spent some time with someone in person for an hour coffee, or, a couple hour chat years earlier. It's conditions for good consequences to have met a lot of people in person and spent an hour or two with them. So I like to do that in city mode, and do less Zoom calls. I still do Zoom calls, of course, with guild people and other things, but it's not a good time for me to meet people online or start new projects online or things like that. City mode's really good for meeting people in person and focusing on in-person connections, meeting as many people as I can. Sometimes I have like 5, 6, 7 coffees or appointments a day or something like that. And then rural mode is very similar, but instead of focusing on in-person connections, I focus on Zoom and online things. And if I'm in a more rural place like I am now, I typically have one host and maybe their family that I'm connected with, maybe another friend in the area or something like that. But there's less in-person people that I'm connected to. Like if I just went to Montana right now, if I had hosts in Montana, hypothetically, like I would have my host there, but I don't really know that many people in Montana, at least right now. And so that's a good time to focus on online connections. And maybe I would have 5, 6, 7 Zoom calls today. Today I have 5 Zoom calls actually, which is great. I love that for me. And that's still sort of manager mode, but focusing on online meetings. And then I still often, rural mode can be very good for maker mode, and like setting aside time to like work on a novel, for example, or work on music, or learn things, read several books or something like that. But just leaning into the specific situation that I'm in, knowing which one it is and what the opportunities that presents are, and making use of that, and even trying to balance that. I remember my godfather telling me when I was a kid that I really loved The Hobbit, and he was telling me about The Lord of the Rings. And he said that if you look at The Lord of the Rings, more or less every chapter alternates between sort of a battle chapter and an adventure chapter. And it just goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I thought that was so cool and a really good way to structure a novel in retrospect, and especially a fantasy genre novel. And I think I found it useful to try to balance rural mode and city mode and even alternate them, where it's like, yeah, I don't know, it's a lot easier for me to get physical rest and creative inspiration and digest things when I'm in rural mode, but also city mode's really good. And so can I balance them? Can I have roughly half split and alternate between them? It's not always possible to do that, but just having a sense of how much time I'm spending in each mode and focus on leaning into what the current situation is. If I tried to make one mode the other mode, it just wouldn't go well, and I wouldn't be using my time effectively. So as I say, I noticed this implicitly years ago, but I've started to make it explicit in the last year and have really been leaning into it. And it's interesting to me. I like to think about the patterns in my life and how to lean into them. So I thought it might be interesting to you as well. Really love my pilgrimage and this way of life, and I love being intentional about it also. So those are some ways that I think about it.